You want to know what's different about Georgia's offense? It's that they're running the ball at a historically low rate. I crunched the numbers. You have to go all the way back to 2006 to find a stat sheet where Georgia is running the ball worse, less. I don't know. You take whichever way you want to take that, but 130 yards per game. You have to go back to 2006 to find something worse than that. 127 yards per game. Sounds pretty good, right? But this is the Georgia Bulldogs. What do you think about when you think of Georgia? When I tell you to think of a Georgia legend, or what they've done really well. It's running the football, right? Nick Chubb, Sonny Michel, Herschel, all those guys. Those are the names that you start to think of first. That's not happening this year, right? There's a few reasons. All right, one of them is they're just not doing it as effectively, not averaging as many yards per carry. And that expectation was that was going to get better in 2024. Why? Because we saw this decline begin last year a little bit. You get Carson Beck in there, they get a little bit trigger happy passing the football. And this season, that's just become even more of the case, right? And look, Georgia lost a game to Alabama. There's a lot of reasons why they lost that game. It's not because they didn't run the ball well. That is just one of the, 5, 6, 7, 8 reasons. All right, they got crushed in the first half. But Georgia's passing, if they keep up the rate that they're passing at right now, Carson Beck is going to shatter the pass attempts rate in just 13 games. The record is 2022 Stetson Bennett in 15 games when Georgia won 15-0, 454 pass attempts. Well, Beck on pace to do that in just 13 games, right? He's on pace for 464, 10 more attempts in just 13 games. Georgia's already penciled in for 13 games this season, right? Even if they don't play in the SEC Championship, they're bowl eligible. They're locked in at 13 games. It could end up being 17. That's the max it could go based on the way the cards fall. I don't think they will play 17 games, and that's not necessarily a great thing. You are playing in the national championship, though, if you do play in 17 games. But that's not the best case scenario for Georgia. That actually would be 16 games. They're not running the ball as well. And it's not just, hey, they didn't run the ball well against Alabama. It's not just, hey, they got outrushed by Kentucky. They were not as effective running the ball against Auburn. They were not effective running the ball against Mississippi State. Even in this win against Texas, it wasn't all peaches and cream running the football. Georgia was granted a lot of short fields by its defense, right? So Georgia didn't have to drive the length of the field that many times in order to go score the football, all right? That was a great defensive performance. That is where you give the flowers to Georgia's defensive side of the football. But look, guys, the expectation heading into this season was, hey, they went out, they got transfer running back Trevor Etienne, one of the best running backs in the portal, not named Quinshon Judkins, right, that Ohio State went out and paid for. Etienne didn't play that first game, whatever, scratch that. It's Nate Frazier, he has a pretty solid game. But since then, it just hasn't been what you thought it was going to be, which was better than last season. Last year wasn't bad, all right? Dejan Edwards, Kendall Milton, over 800 yards each, dealing with injuries. 13 touchdowns for one of them, 14 touchdowns for the other, right? It wasn't a bad rushing season. They got a little bit out of Roderick Robinson. They got a little bit out of Cash Jones last year as well. This year, it has been just not that. And it's also not as much of a committee as it has been in the past. Part of that's injuries. Roderick Robinson, we haven't seen him yet this year. The guy that was supposed to be the number 2 running back, dealing with turf toe. No real update on that. Branson Robinson, a guy that's expected to get back in there. Well, he does get back in there. Looks a little bit like a shell of himself, understandably so. And then he hurts his MCL, right? So now he's out for however long he's going to be out for. So you're relying on Etienne, a transfer running back, which I think out of all positions, running back is one where you shouldn't worry about meshing in as much. It's different when you got a transfer quarterback. You see that it took a few weeks for Dylan Gabriel in Oregon to get things rolling over there. You see how it could fail really easily with DJU and Florida State. With the running back, it's supposed to be a little bit more seamless. But part of it is they're not running the ball as much, right? I mean, there was a certain point this season where Georgia was passing 62% of the time, right? Now that's knocked down to 56%, but still, it has been pass heavy. Part of that is Carson Beck throws for 50 times against Alabama, and they're in garbage time, and Georgia only runs for 80 yards. Against Mississippi State, Carson Beck throws 48 times, and Georgia did not run the ball super effectively against Mississippi State. They just went away from it. And the defense started playing a little bit worse. And, I mean, if they didn't have Anthony Edwards' 52-yard run against Mississippi State, we're talking about 94 yards on 28 carries, which by my math off the top of my head is around 3.3 something yards per carry, 3.35. That's just not going to cut it in this league, right? Like I said earlier, why did Georgia beat Texas? There's a few reasons. Defensively, they shut down the run game. They affected the quarterback. But you ask Kirby Smart, and that's all he wants to talk about is how they shut down the run game. This is what he said. The bigger factor in the game was the inability to run the ball, because we felt like if they could run the ball well, it was going to be tough. They never really established the run, and that's what this league is. That's what you've got to do in this league, because if you can't do that, it makes you more one-dimensional. Ironically so, Georgia has been a little bit one-dimensional itself, and that's been through the air. So I think that the answer is kind of within Kirby Smart's answer itself, and is that Georgia just hasn't been running the ball as much this season. And maybe my eye's a little bit untrained. Is it the offensive line not getting the get-off that it has in the past? There's a little bit of that to it, right? And they've got some injuries on the offensive line, but they always have. This is not new. Tate Rowledge got hurt in 2021. Amarius Mims got hurt last year. This is not... There's no excuse there. It's something that happens every year for Georgia. They always have these significant injuries, and it hits the offensive line just as much as it hits any other group, right? It's hit the receiver group as well over the course of its history. But Carson Beck, I think that part of this, and you head into the season, I talked about expectations. One guy whose expectations were through the roof was Carson's. And maybe it wasn't justified. It hasn't been justified this season. In fact, he's regressed a little bit. And it's no hate. This is just the truth. He doesn't look as good as he did last season. He's already thrown for more interceptions than he did a year ago, right? And he's played half the games. The weapons are not as good on the outside. That's affected it, but they're throwing the ball more, and they've been in closer games where they feel like they have to throw the ball more. There's a lot of factors that goes into it. It's not just Georgia has decided, you know what, we're not going to run the ball as well because it's just not going to be a part of who we are. I guarantee you Kirby Smart and Mike Bobo and them want to run the ball as much as possible. But right now what they've got is a quarterback who, despite his flaws, is one of the better ones in the country. And they are asking him to do a lot. Maybe it's too much. Sometimes the numbers get skewed like the Alabama game and the Mississippi State game. But it's also part of just what they're doing right now. You see early in the games, what are they doing? They went out against Texas and they threw the ball 3 times. They went out and they're just opening up with the pass game. So it looks like that's the new philosophy, is the air raid. I'm countering that a little bit. I think Georgia does need to figure out the run game a little bit more, because obviously we've seen now there's going to be games where they're just not connecting and they're dropping balls, the receivers. These things are happening, right? And they're being coupled with Georgia not running the ball super effectively, still winning games, right? I talked about this a little bit last week. That's kind of the scary part for Georgia's opponents, is haven't put it all together, and they're still beating top 5 teams by double digits on the road. They're still beating top 10 teams by 30 points on a neutral site. So I think you're kind of getting an all-over-the-place performance from Georgia this season. But what has definitely not been all over the place has been its run game. And it's just straight up been lackluster. And if Carson Beck is having an off night and they can't run the ball, eventually that's going to happen against the wrong opponent. All right? At Texas, it wasn't the wrong opponent, but it happened against Alabama. And look, I still think Georgia's the best team in the SEC. I still think that it's probably the best team in the country, although Oregon is looking pretty good now and is justifying that number 1 next to its name. But if they don't get better on the ball, guys, this is not going to happen this year. Newsletter, it's down below. I have it linked. It's really easy. It's free to sign up. I don't know why you wouldn't be signed up. That's all I ask of you guys. Thanks for watching.